All right, Tim, I had a great question come on a recent webinar I did on retirement planning. I want to get your take on this, as I suspect others are thinking about this as well. And the question is, when would you recommend switching to contributing to Roth IRA versus the traditional 401k contribution? So we're talking about the Roth versus traditional balance here. What are your thoughts?
This is a tough one, Tim, because this is kind of like, should I invest or should I pay down debt? There's just so much more to this question, so I would definitely be asking questions to answer this question. This is the quintessential, it depends, right? So I think, I think what we're really talking, so I think what we're really talking about here, I think, is like asset location. So at nauseum, we talk about asset allocation kind of at a high level, the percentage to stocks to bonds. Asset location is more about what do we have in the three most prominent buckets, which are, pre-tax, which is the traditional. So that could be a traditional IRA, it could be a traditional 401k, traditional 403b. The next bucket is the after tax. So anything with a Roth designation, Roth 401k, Roth TSP, Roth IRA, etc. And then the taxable. So this is typically we would call this a brokerage account that is funded with after-tax money, but also you would pay capital gains on. So when we fast forward to retirement, one of the things that we need to have is a healthy percentage in each one of these buckets. Now, depending on your retirement timeline and when you can access your retirement accounts, which is typically 59 and a half years old, the percentage will be informed by that, which a lot of us don't know what that is, right? We have an idea. So this is a tough question to answer. Now, I will say that for a lot of pharmacists, this question is forced, the answer to this question is forced on them by the IRS, right? Because the IRS will say for a single tax filer that's earning $150,000, once they start earning $150,000, that the ability to contribute to a Roth phases out completely from $150,000 to $165,000. So once you make $165,000 in $1, you no longer can contribute directly to the Roth. You can do the backdoor conversions, which we've talked about at nauseam. I'm sure you have some episodes that we can reference there. For a married filing joint, that phase out starts at $236,000, and then phases completely out at $246,000, which again is a large portion of pharmacists that are out there. So oftentimes that leads them to look in other places to put retirement dollars because they either can't do a Roth conversion or a backdoor conversion, or they just don't have access to it. So that's the one thing. So I think the questions I would ask are, what is the current makeup of your retirement balances now? So what percentage is in pre-tax? What percentage is in after-tax? What percentage is in taxable? When do you expect to retire? Again, that's a little bit of a moving number, especially if you're further away. What's your current tax bracket or AGI? Is there a Roth 401k option? So I think it was President Obama who really forced that. Many of these retirement plans used to be an added benefit for a lot of plans to have that. Now it's kind of the norm. So you often have the ability to either elect pre-tax or elect after-tax, i.e. Roth, in your 401k, 403b. Is there cash available to do like conversion? So if I wanted to do, if I had a large amount of assets in the pre-tax bucket and very little in Roth, can I afford to move some of those dollars into after-tax and pay the taxes now? What other savings do you have that having more of a Roth IRA and not be subject to RMDs in the future, right? So that's one of the benefits of Roth balances is that they're not subject to the required minimum distributions once you reach a certain age, which is the IRS saying, hey, remember all those years of tax-free growth? Now we want you to distribute that. Roths typically don't have that. And then also questions about what's the timeline for Social Securities? What's that benefit? what percentage of that will be kind of your floor, your essential expenses, et
Mhm.
cetera. And then, you know, if you're looking at the other side of the spectrum is like, what's your student loan strategy? I will say that there are a lot of people that are seeking a forgiveness strategy that are funded in Roth, which doesn't make sense to me, right? And they don't see that optimization. Where do you live? And, you know, where do you live today and where do you expect to retire? You know, if you live in Ohio, which has income tax, and I plan to retire in Florida that doesn't, that plays in this. So this, again, if you add wrinkles and questions to this, it becomes harder. I think what I would overlay, although I could be wrong, because I know President Trump has talked about, you know, lowering taxes, but I think by and large, most people, most financial professionals believe that taxes will increase in the future. So if you can pay them now, pay the taxes now, that's a benefit to you because of the deficit and everything else that's going on economically, the tax code or the tax rates should be going up in the future. But if I'm going to retire in Florida, why would I pay Ohio state income tax if I'm going to retire? You know, so there's that balance too. So, and I'm probably just scratching the surface, Tim, to be completely honest. But I think overall, if we are more of the mindset of like, I just don't know, what I would say is that I want a little bit in column A, pre-tax, a little bit in column B, after tax, and a little bit in column C, taxable. And try to, you know, follow that. And I think sometimes when I talk to prospective clients, you know, a overwhelming majority of their retirement assets are tied up in pre-tax, which means if I have $2 million in pre-tax dollars when I go to retire, I don't have $2 million because I still have to pay Uncle Sam 25% or whatever it is. And I think that's a little bit of a mistake because I want more in Roth, I want more in taxable, et cetera. So all of these things, you know, even like, are you planning to still work when you retire? Do you have real estate income? You know, do you see yourself doing consulting work? All of that plays a part of how we best build a retirement paycheck. So the question of should I contribute to a Roth versus a traditional? I don't know. Yes to both. But I think like getting down into the nitty gritty of what we should be doing is hard because I just think it's a more of a nuanced question.
Yeah, one of the things you said on the show before, Tim, right, is that everyone and their situation, their financial plan, right? You're a unique butterfly.
Yep.
And I think this might be the best it depends example we've gotten so far. You know, we say that a lot and we mean it, but this is a good one. I mean, just off the top of your head, you came up with, I don't know, I heard 7 or 8, I think, different questions behind the question that will help inform and answer this question. And then you start to pair this with other parts of the plan. You gave the student loan example, and all of a sudden, like, situations shift and change, right, of what direction we might take. So I think what's hard about this is, especially for people that are maybe earlier in their careers that are listening to the show, their heads might be spinning, and this can become, or it can feel like, wow, it's just so overwhelming. You know, paralysis sets in just because there's so much to analyze, and it can impede people contributing and doing the most important thing, which is making contributions so that compound interest can start to do its thing. However, as we've talked about on the show before, and we'll link to the episode on building a retirement paycheck, because I think there's a really strong connection here between this topic. Not all retirement buckets are created equal, or not all investing buckets, if we broaden that out, are created equal. So you can have two people that both have $5 million, but where is that $5 million is going to have a significant impact on how they build the retirement paycheck.
Yeah. And I think often, you know, we talk about like, you know, how much do I need to retire? And I remember this vividly, you know, in my last firm, you know, we'd have people that would have very little, you know, retirement assets. They would still be working through a lot of debt. And they're like, I want to retire in like 10 years. And I'm like, you should have came 10 years ago to kind of start working through this, because that's going to be, it's like, you can retire, right? But your lifestyle is going to be very much diminished. And similarly, a lot of these asset location decisions have to be addressed over the long term. I can't snap my fingers and move $3 million worth of assets from pre-tax to after tax to kind of level the balance or level the playing field a little bit, because you're going to just take like you're just going to take a huge hit from taxes in that year or 2 or 3 years that you're trying to do this. So to me, planning, and this is what we talked about in the last question, is like, oh, it's like, all right, I got it from here, nothing to see here, nothing's going to change. Like, these are one of the things that we have to look at and address to make sure that, again, when it comes, because the ability to build a paycheck, a retirement paycheck in the most tax efficient way possible takes years of planning in the making to get to that. And you're not always going to have all the information of like where you're going to retire and when, but if you have a general sense of where that's going to be, we can get in front of that a decade, 20 years out to make sure that where we're seeding these buckets is most appropriate for your situation. And I just think it's an overlooked part of the overall financial plan of where you're actually putting these dollars. So yeah, to me, it's an important thing to address and continue to review and assess as you go.
Yeah, and for those listening, if this is piquing your interest, make sure to check out some of the episodes we've done previously. We did a retirement series, Alphabet Super Retirement Accounts, Navigating Retirement Paycheck, lots of content that we have on the podcast that covers in more detail what we're talking about here. It's a great question. And if you have a question that you'd like us to feature on an upcoming episode and to discuss further, you can send us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com, or you can submit your question online by going to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask YFP. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Have a great rest of your week.